There we go. All right, so you may have seen this video. This took the internet by storm this week. This is Steve from, that is Steve from Blue's Clues, and this video is 2 minutes long.
In all that time. Hi. You got a second? Okay. You remember how when we were younger, we used to run around and hang out with Blue and find clues and talk to Mr. Salt and freak out about the mail and do all the fun stuff. And then one day I was like, oh, hey, guess what? Big news. I'm leaving. This is my brother Joe. He's your new best friend. And then I got on a bus and I left. And we didn't see each other for like a really long time. Can we just talk about that? Great. Because I realized that was kind of abrupt. I just kind of got up and went to college. And that was really challenging, by the way, but great, because I got to use my mind and take a step at a time. And now I literally am doing many of the things that I wanted to do. And then look at you, and look at all you have done and all you have accomplished in all that time. And it's just so amazing, right? I mean, we started out with clues, and now it's what? Student loans and jobs and families. And some of it has been kind of hard, you know? I know you know. And I wanted to tell you that I really couldn't have done all of that without your help. And in fact, all the help that you helped me with when we were younger is still helping me today, right now. And that's super cool. I guess I just wanted to say that after all these years, I never forgot you, ever. And I'm super glad we're still friends. Thanks for listening. You look great, by the way. Whatever it is you're doing, it's working.
So that's Steve, everybody. And I wanted to start today's masterclass with Steve because it's such a touching video. You know, did anybody feel touched? Show of hands if you felt touched by watching that. Yeah, did you feel touched in your mess? Like when he said jobs and families and student loans, it's like it hits you here. And that connection, that's what we're going to be talking about today. In today's masterclass, your message equals your mess plus age. So I'm going to go through a quick agenda so we know what we're discussing. We're going to talk about the clarity of the truest you, and how you can use this clarity to resonate with your audience. We'll talk about how desperation repels and common unity attracts, why your greatest wound is your greatest power, and how to fake it till you make imposter syndrome your friend. And we're also gonna have an Anchor brand content workbook. I'll give you the link to this at the end. For those of you who registered live, you should have received a link to this earlier today. And if you're watching this on the replay, there should be a button somewhere nearby to get this workbook. And what this workbook does is it helps you create repeatable content that you can use to attract your audience. And the last client that I had that worked with this workbook, she said that it helped move her vision forward in a way that she never thought possible. So this workbook is going to be really helpful for you. But first, I want to talk to you about noise. The internet's a really loud place. Every day on the internet, there's more than 2 million blog posts published. There's 294 billion emails sent every single day. And 864,000 hours of video just in one day. And so to stand out from all of that noise, the best thing that you can do is resonate. Resonation is a scientific phenomenon that happens when identically shaped objects they vibrate in an identical frequency. And so if you have two identical wine glasses and one of them vibrates just by being in the presence of that wine glass, and another wine glass will resonate at the same frequency. And that's how you stand out of the crowd. With all this noise on the internet every day, the only signals that we pick up are the ones that resonate with us. And that resonation, it gives you focus. It means that instead of trying a whole bunch of different messages to see what might work and screaming into the void, instead you're clear on what your message is and who you talk to. And what I found in working with a bunch of clients over the last 10 years, helping them create and promote their messaging, is that it's often in the mess that we find the clearest message. Your mess is an articulation of the lessons that you've learned. Ron Tite likes to say that imperfection leads to trust, that it makes you real and powerful and believable. That imperfection is something we tend to hide for a bunch of reasons, but it's in sharing our imperfections that we become real to others. We get into problems, though, when we share the imperfections too soon, when your mess hasn't aged. Roadkill is so gross because it's fresh mess. It's just happened. People avoid it to the extent that this guy did with the winner of the Not My Job award, where he didn't even want to touch it. He just painted right over it in the highway. But this same kind of mess, when it's preserved and when it's aged, is the sort of thing that we study. If a roadkill is a fresh mess and a fossil is an aged mess, then this gives you a clue for how to find your message. We have to let our mess age to really find it. Julia Cameron, the author of The Artist's Way, likes to say that it's impossible to get better and look good at the same time. If you want to improve, you're going to get messy. It's part of the territory. So I'll share with you one of my messes that's led to my message. I was in a spelling bee when I was in 5th grade, and I won unexpectedly. I didn't try very hard. I just kind of showed up and spelled words right repeatedly because I was an avid reader and I had a good enough handle of the English language that I fumbled my way into winning this spelling bee. And so I went to a much bigger spelling bee that was a very big deal. And there were hundreds of kids there and thousands of people in the audience. And they gave me all this stuff to study that I didn't bother with. I just thought, well, I'm good at spelling. I'm going to show up and win this spelling bee too. And they were really proud of this cutting edge technology that they had at the time, where they had a cassette recorder and they plugged it into the mic so that they could record kids speaking their words and spelling them. And they had this complicated set of rules for how to challenge the judges. If you think that you spelled a word right and the judges said you didn't, you could go back to the tape. So they explained this to the hundreds of kids that were on the stage. And then we started the spelling bee and I lost early in one of the early rounds. I don't remember what word I misspelled, but I was really distressed that suddenly I had lost this spelling bee, and I walked off stage and I thought, oh, this is all done. And this lady in the wings said, do you want to challenge the judges and stay in the spelling bee? And I was a kid. I was like, yeah, I want to stay in the spelling bee. And so she walked me to the judges' table and they stopped the spelling bee. And the whole audience got a flutter because there was somebody challenging the judges. So they went to the tape and they played it on the speakers for the entire audience to hear. And thousands of people heard me spell the name wrong, spell the word wrong. And it was the most embarrassing moment of my life. And I've never shared this story publicly. My wife didn't even know this story. My wife of 20 years. I told her a couple of weeks ago, and she said, "You've never told me about this mess." But this mess, when I fled the auditorium in tears, that crafted the core of my message. That might be why I've spent so much time on stage in my life. I've done Shakespeare in the Park dozens of times. I was a street musician for a bunch of years. I've been a professional public speaker for a while. I used to travel around and go to conferences, and now I do it virtually. But every time I have a performance, I show up prepared. I do my work. I get ready for the experience. And that message of showing up prepared and giving your best, that's underneath everything that I do. And I found this message because of my mess. You know, it's vulnerable for me to share this with you, that I had this mess and I looked this bad. But as Brene Brown tells us, feeling vulnerable is a reminder that you're alive. But this is a very delicate line to walk. The reason why vulnerability is difficult to share is because it's gross. Your mess is smelly and it's stinky and it's like compost. You know, you throw a whole bunch of garbage on the compost pile, and if you rummage around in the top of it, it's disgusting. But down at the bottom, you get some of the richest soil to grow your food. There's this concept in gardening called vermiculture, and it's disgusting. I'll just go over the basics with you. You use earthworms to get their castings in a compost pile. It's their poop. And earthworm castings are so nutrition rich for plants that that plants flourish when they grow out of this mess. But that mess isn't ready until it's aged. A fresh mess is repulsive and smelly and gross. But when it decomposes and it leaves the purest artifacts of the experience, then it can create some amazing things. You know, something happens to you in your life and you have this mess and it creates a necessary change. And that change stinks, and then you react to it. And during that time, your mess isn't ready to share. But after, you get some distance from your mess. You integrate it into this new version of yourself. And then you begin to doubt. That doubt is the key step, because suddenly that mess becomes your message. And it's when you begin to doubt that you know it's ready. We'll get into how that doubt works in a little bit, but first I want to talk to you about why it makes you unique. Your mess is the most unique thing about you. Other people can mimic your vocabulary and your stance and your dialect, but nobody can mimic your mess except you. Your mess and the lessons that you've learned from it, those struggles, that's what's made you who you are. And there's no one alive who is youer than you. Your mess is the clue to what creates unique distinctiveness about you. If you want to stand out of the sea of sameness, using your mess to guide you to your message is one of the most surefire ways that I know of how to do that. I belong to this program called Thought Leaders Business School, and the founder of the program, Matt Church, is a famous public speaker in Australia, and he likes to say that it's not a personal development program, but you will go through personal development in the program. The purpose of the program is to help clever people be commercially smart. And so they teach us to package and repurpose and sell our ideas. But there's a lot of personal development exercises that we go through on the path to find those ideas and to clarify our messaging. And one of the exercises that we use is called the timeline exercise. And we're going to do this exercise today. It consists of 3 questions. What happened? What did you make it mean? And what's that about? Those 3 questions make up the timeline exercise. What happened? What did you make it mean? And what's that about? So right now, we're going to go into a little bit of thinking time. And I want you to get a pen and paper and write down 3 to 5 options for your mess. Okay, you've had plenty of messes, especially if you've got the benefit of having gone through a dysfunctional period in your life. And I want you to write down, what are those messages that could be underneath your message? Right. You should have some good candidates for your mess. So now the second question, we're just going to have 30 seconds. Next to each of those options, write a word or a phrase for what you made it mean. Great. And now for the third question, see if you can find a word. What's that about? Great. The timeline exercise is something that you can do a number of times. Digging into your mess, going to the bottom of the compost pile, there's all sorts of rich material down there, and it's going to be different every season. For me, when I went to the spelling bee, what happened was I left in tears because I wasn't prepared. What I made it mean was, if I don't show up prepared, then I could face disaster. And what that's about is performance. And that's the message underneath a lot of my work, is performance. Knowing that that's my message, it helps calibrate everything that I do. So what's your message? What's the big message underneath everything you do? Because of where we're looking for this message, we're often going to find ourselves coming up against our trauma. Your biggest messes are usually the most traumatic, but your greatest wound is your greatest power. Your trauma gives you an additional lens through which you can examine the human experience. You know more about life when you've died a little. The lessons that you learn from trauma are not shallow. They're some of the deepest and most meaningful understanding of our humanity. We find it through our trauma. Wallace Stegner said that most things break, including hearts. And the lessons of life amount not to wisdom, but to scar tissue and callus. Your scars are both a history teacher and a fortune teller. They look to your past and they look to your future. Your scars guide you through your life. They keep you away from danger and they give you experience to handle new difficulties. There's this scale, the ACE scale, that measures adverse childhood events. And the 10 adverse childhood events that were studied by Kaiser and the CDC are difficult experiences that you have through childhood. Things like your parents being divorced, having emotional or physical abuse, having substance abuse in the household, seeing your mother physically abused. And every one of these events increases your likelihood for a whole host of health problems. And what they found was 40% of the American populace had zero adverse childhood events, and between 12 and 15% of people have 2 to 3 adverse childhood events, and 16% of people have 4 or more. And the likelihood of having an autoimmune disorder or a substance abuse problem or going to jail is dramatically increased the higher this score is. I happen to score 6 on this scale. And having so much trauma early in my life has proved to me the truth of what Rumi said, that the wound is the place where the light enters you. It's through that trauma that you gain access to illumination. But when you're going through the trauma, it's not the right time to share it. There's a big difference between a plane at 30,000 feet and a plane that's on the ground. What they can see and what they can do are very different. You know, imagine that you're on a doorstep and you're looking at a door knocker and it's right there in front of your face and you smell something rotten, but you don't see it on the door knocker, so you don't know what it is. You step back off the porch so you can see the entire doorway, but there's nothing decomposing in front of you. When you step back into the yard and you can see the whole house, you can see it's covered with eggs. You couldn't see those eggs on the porch, but when you pull back and gain some distance, you see that the house has had eggs thrown at it. And when you step back to the sidewalk, you can see the houses on the other side of this house are filled with kids having a loud house party. And then when you step back across the street, you see that on the other side of those two houses, it's a burned out, fiery wasteland. And your perspective changes with distance. The further away you get from your mess, the more you can understand it. Your mess is at the vanishing point. And if you're at the vanishing point too, there's nothing that you can really see. But when you gain distance, and that distance might be geographical or temporal or metaphorical, the distance gives you perspective to understand what happened. Every event that happens in our lives, we spiral around it in greater circles. And we see it every season from a different angle and a different distance. And that gives us understanding. The same thing can mean very different things depending on how far away you are from it. A war is a battle for resources, but also for blood. A general understands a war very differently than a refugee. The way that we understand a war happening today is very different than a war that happened 1,000 years ago, because the distance is so different. There's an author by the name of Dave Ramsey. He does a bunch of personal finance books. And he tells this story in the beginning of a lot of his books about driving his Jaguar into a gas station. And he fills up the tank and he doesn't know if his card is going to be declined or not. And that's his origin story for then going on to become a personal finance magnate who can teach other people how to manage their finances. He's gained a lot of criticism because he doesn't practice what he preaches. You know, he tells you how to pay off your credit cards using a debt snowball and how to cut your expenses. But what he did was go bankrupt and wiped his debts clean. So he's rightfully earned some criticism for hypocrisy, but I want to focus on this story that he shares of driving into a gas station with his Jaguar and having his card declined because he can't pay for the gas. When he leaves that gas station and he says, you know, I've got this great idea for paying off credit cards in a debt snowball. Are you going to believe that guy? If the same guy 20 years later says, I had my card declined on my Jaguar, and then I did all of these things, I gained all this distance from my mess, and now I want to share with you my message. Isn't that much more believable? It's because of that distance that you earn the right to share your message. So don't share it too soon. This causes a whole host of other problems with secrecy. Keeping your mess secret decreases your authenticity. The nature of a secret is to be unknown. And we all keep secrets. There was a study done by the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, and they studied 10 different studies. It was a meta study that had 13,000 different secrets in 38 different categories. And they looked for patterns in all of these secrets that people keep. And they found that the average person keeps 13 secrets. And 5 of those secrets they've never told to another person. And I don't know how many secrets you have kept, but I know it's a fair number. And I know some of your messes are secret. And deciding when to share that mess is a real challenge. I'm a man of many secrets. There's a lot that I don't share publicly, both because of my past and because of my views. And I made a list once of all the secrets that I kept, and I got up to about 15 major secrets that would change how people thought of me. And I realized that the persona that I share is very different from the persona that I am. And so I had occasion to do a lot of thinking about secrets. And we're going to do an exercise for those of you who are watching live on secrets. And to do this exercise, I need to share with you the levels of secrecy. There's 2 basic levels. There's public and there's private. There's things that you share publicly that are different than what you share privately. The secrets can be shared among the private group and not shared among the public group. And there's a couple of levels in between here. There's casual. You know, you might share some things with friends or family that you didn't share with the general populace. But then there's things that are so secret, you wouldn't even share them with your family. These are intimate, right? And if we look at the type of people in each one of these categories, there's your audience, there's your friends, there's your family, and there's your lovers. I don't know how you are, but, you know, intimate people. And then these aren't even the only levels. You know, if there's secrets that you don't share with anyone else, then let's make a level for that. And let's make a level for promoted, things that you would share to strangers on the street. I promoted this masterclass to people I don't even know to encourage anyone to come. And then there's things that are so secret that you keep them only to yourself, okay? So now we're going to use the annotation toolbar to put some stamps on here. So I'm going to put some instructions up for how to find the annotation toolbar. Oops, that didn't work. Let me fix that real quick. All right. So this will tell you, for those of you who are attending live, how to find the annotation toolbar. And I want you to find the check stamp. And I want you to put that stamp in the gutter, in between the two words, on the level where you curse. Where do you feel comfortable cursing? Do you curse in public so that anybody can hear you? Do you curse in private, only with your family? Where do you curse? Great. For the next stamp, for the arrow, I want to know where you talk politics. Do you talk politics with anyone and everyone? Do you talk politics with your family or not with your family? We all have different levels of comfort and different levels of secrecy depending on the topic. For the next topic, I want to know where you talk about money. And I mean like really talk about money, your bank balance, not your investment strategies for the future, but how much money you have this week. If you ran out of cash, who would you feel the most comfortable talking with? Great. All right, for the next one, where do you talk religion? Do you talk religion with strangers? Do you talk religion with friends? Do you talk religion with nobody? All right, we've got 2 stamps left. So for the question mark stamp, where do you get naked? We're talking about secrets. Where do you get naked? Everybody's got different levels of comfort here. Some people are nudists and they get naked with anybody, with strangers, with friends, with family. Some people don't let their partner see them naked. And then this last one might be different. Where do you get naked when drunk? This might be a different level. You might feel more comfortable or less comfortable. Great. This gives us a really good spread of where the levels of secrecy are. Excellent. Great. Thanks for doing that exercise with me. That was really fun. Okay. So the secrets that you share, they demonstrate your authenticity. You know, I'm gonna come back into this whiteboard because I want to. No, you know what? We're gonna take a second and have Mr. Gary Vaynerchuk tell us about secrets. All right, so I'm going to pull up a video of Gary Vee. You guys know who Gary Vee is, right? This is Gary Vee.
Why do you curse so much? For a guy who doesn't need to.
Because I only believe in authenticity. It's how I talk. When I think about, do I care about my employees? It feels more in my brain and my heart and my soul. Do I give a fuck about my employees more than do I care about my employees? That's from my brain and heart to my mouth.
But I feel like there are people who
will never consume my content. Are you kidding me?
Because of the F.
I am willing to deal with the ramifications of me being my full self.
Do you curse at home?
A ton.
In front of your kids?
Yep. I'm just not devastated to go into my 4th grade teacher and Mrs. Thompson's like, you have a real problem. What's that, Mrs. Thompson? Your daughter curses. I just don't see that as a real problem. Me and Mrs. Thompson just don't see the world the same way. I am the byproduct of Mrs. Thompson telling me my whole life that I would be a failure. Mrs. Thompson thought that a D in science was going to be my downfall, just like she thinks saying fuck is her downfall. I don't agree.
Why do you curse so much?
So there's no right or wrong way to decide where your comfort level is with your secrets. You can curse anywhere you want. And as we've seen, Gary Vaynerchuk is hugely successful. And he curses right up here at the top. He curses to strangers and he doesn't care. What Gary's done is he's maneuvered this line. This line is adjustable. You know, this line creates a distance right here. And this distance is your authenticity. You're much more authentic with yourself than you are with the public. You're more authentic with your partner than you are with your family. The more secrets that you share, the more authentic you are. And what Gary's done is he's taken this line and he's moved it up, which creates more distance and more authenticity. So people in the public, they resonate readily with Gary Vaynerchuk, especially if they like to curse, because he's providing a message that they really like, that they vibe with. But you can also move this down. And this is something I've done a lot in my life because I'm a man of many secrets and I don't share a lot about my life. And because of that, my authenticity is stunted, not just with my audience, but with myself. And that's caused me to do a lot of thinking about sharing secrets, which is what we're going to discuss next. When you have secrets, you create a displacement between who you are and who people think you are. We like people when we align with them or with what we know of them. And learning a secret requires that we realign our understanding of this person. Now, for people like Gary Vaynerchuk, he follows the advice of Queen Victoria, that it's worth being shot at to see how much one is loved. The people who love Gary Vaynerchuk fanatically love Gary Vaynerchuk. And the people who don't like him, he doesn't bother with. He knows that they're not going to like him. So his comfort in sharing secrets is very different than other people. In occult literature, there's this idea that giving someone your true name gives them power over you. And that's what a secret does. Sharing a secret creates either intimacy or repulsion. Secrets are the shadow obscuring our authentic self. And bringing a secret to light, it can turn some people away, but it can also bring people closer to you. In my experience, and with what I've seen with my clients, sharing secrets attracts the right kind of people to you after your mess has aged. When your mess is too fresh, it's clouded by desperation. Dave Ramsey can't fill up his Jaguar and he wants to sell you some financial advice, you're thinking, well, this guy just needs to fill up his tank. He's desperate. I don't know if it would be worth it for me to support his desperation. But if he's already a multimillionaire and he wants to sell you some financial advice, it makes a lot more sense because the desperation is gone. The secrets that we keep, they run a lot of our unconscious programming. And the study that I cited earlier from the meta study that looked at 10 different studies about secrets, they found that the biggest benefit to sharing a secret was that it no longer preoccupied your thinking. Carl Jung, the famed psychotherapist, said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. My secrets were tearing me up inside. And I worked with a life coach to go through some childhood trauma that I was dealing with. And I told her my challenge, that this persona that you're seeing right now is very different than my authentic persona that I don't share with anybody else. And that dissonance was causing me some real difficulty. And she said something to me that I think about all the time. She said, I don't share my wounds. I share the wisdom of my wounds. So I want to offer this to you as a potential solution. If you're struggling with what to share, you don't have to share the wound. You can share the wisdom of the wound. I was delighted to see that Matt Church, the founder of Thought Leaders Business School, also has multiple personas. That he's got Matthew, the person that he is at home with his family. And then he's got Matt, the dynamic superstar powerhouse who gets on stage and dazzles everybody with his charisma. And those two people are different. And I heard him talk about these two sides of himself once in an AMA and Ask Me Anything. And so I took the opportunity to ask him, how do you calibrate how much to show? And what he told me was, he asked himself this question: is it in service? Is sharing this secret in service to those who I'm sharing it with? Or is it out of vanity or ego that I want to share it? And he said that this helps him calibrate when to share and when to hold back. And I find this very useful. My book, Marketing Yourself, which will hopefully be published this year, it might be early next year, but it's on the way. It doesn't talk about my time as a homeless runaway. But that mess is underneath this message. I ran away from home when I was 16, and I lived as a street musician for a long time. I graduated high school while I was sleeping in my car. And what I learned during that time was that if I could go into a fast food restaurant at 2 p.m. when people were who were working there were bored and they had nothing to do, that I could charm them into giving me the old food that would have to be thrown away soon. I learned that by offering environment and ambiance to people for free, by playing a guitar on a street corner, would fill my guitar case with coins that I could use to survive another day. I learned that by marketing myself, I could survive. That's the mess underneath this message, but I don't share it in the book. Because I don't share my wounds, I share the wisdom of my wounds. Right now. Anyway, my plan is to eventually share more of my wounds. And these are the 3 books that I want to write. If I write these 3 books, I'll consider my life's work complete. Marketing Yourself is going to print, hopefully later this year. Life Balance is my next book. And I'm just beginning to explore the mess that leads to this. I suffer from an autoimmune disorder. because I nearly worked myself to death getting to New Zealand 4 years ago. And this disorder has some disgusting symptoms I'm not going to share with you today, but I struggle with chronic fatigue, which means that sometimes I have the energy to get through the day and sometimes I don't. And what I've learned in dealing with this mess is I'm finding very valuable, not only for myself, but others who suffer from this condition have found it valuable as well. But I'm not ready to share this mess yet. I'm working through the mess. I'm stirring the compost pile because I know that eventually I'm going to have a message. My third book is Runaway, and that's my memoir. This is the only picture I have of myself as a child. And I'm not going to share with you today why I was cut out of this photo or what happened to me as a child. But I'm going to share with you that dealing with that mess is traumatic in itself. Just stirring the compost pile stirs things in me that I need to have distance and age to be able to handle. And sharing your mess is vulnerable. But that vulnerability can identify where the boundary is. Albert Camus said that if you go too far, then you can find the truth. If you share too much, you'll clearly see where the boundary is. I've shared my runaway story with people a few times, and sometimes it's been too much. And by going too far, I could find the truth. A lot of us suffer from this condition called imposter syndrome. 70% of people statistically suffer from this. But the good news is, if you feel imposter syndrome, it's a good thing, because imposters don't feel this feeling. Imposter syndrome is a natural consequence of growth, because your growth creates a gap between who you are and who you used to be. Your identity is stuck in the past with all of your memories, and there's a lot of those, and all of the validation of who you used to be. And this new you that you've been for just a little while, somebody might know you for just a moment and think you're great. And that positive feedback is so easy to ignore, because that person only knows who you are right now. They don't know all the mistakes that led to you becoming this person. But it's through those mistakes that we earn mastery. Most of the masters of their craft have learned it because they failed. And so they feel like imposters. John Steinbeck says, he used to say, I'm not a writer. I've been fooling myself and other people. Maya Angelou said that after 11 books, she always thought, uh-oh, they're going to find out. I've been running a game on everyone. Albert Einstein said that the exaggerated esteem of his life work made him feel that he was an involuntary swindler. If you feel imposter syndrome, you're in good company. Matt Church identified it, that the truer the angle of your edge, the more you feel imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is a very common feeling in the thought leaders community, because the reason why we've gotten good at something is because we struggle with it. Matt talks about this phenomenon called the irony of expertise, and that, because he's seen it in so many experts, that you gain expertise in something that you struggle with, and you keep working at, and you keep working at it, and you learn through repetitive failure. And when you see all those failures, you think that you stink. But those failures earn mastery. The only difference between a master and a novice is that the master has failed 10,000 more times than the novice has ever tried. We're all fakers. Every expert begins unqualified. Knowledge can be gained by study, but experience is only earned by the fakers, by the ones who are doing something they have no business doing, but they do it anyway, and they make it their business. James Clear said that anything new is accomplished by unqualified people. Because if you're doing something new, you're not qualified to do it by definition. But that newness makes you unique. Lady Gaga said that being different is a talent. You illuminate what makes you special in the sea of sameness around you. And that illumination can lead you to this Japanese concept known as Ikigai. Ikigai is an overlap of 4 areas. There's what you love, what you do well, what the world needs, and what the world will pay for. And the overlaps between these are your passion, your vocation, your career, and your charity. And that's if you overlap 2 of these circles, you can find one of those. If you overlap 3 of these circles, you'll feel satisfied, or you'll feel fulfilled, or you'll feel content, or you'll feel comfortable. But Ikigai, the bliss, is when you feel all 4. I'm confident that what you do well is covered in your mess. Your mess is what gives you mastery of your topic. There's this YouTuber named Mark Rober, and he talks about the Super Mario effect, how if you give a kid a series of 12 buttons and you ask them to hit the buttons in a certain order and hold them for a certain length of time, they won't care. But if you hook those buttons up to a controller and have that controller guide a pixelated plumber to stomp on turtles and save princesses, they'll sit there and practice again and again and again until they do it well. And it's the repetitive failure that allows them to do that. Failure feeds learning if it's fun. So what mess have you been unable to get away from? What mess reveals your message? This is easier to find with age. As David Bowie said, that through age, you become the person that you always should have been. And that mess, if you let it out of you, it can save you. But as St. Thomas said, if you don't bring it forth, then it will destroy you. And that's what your mess can do for you and to you. Those are the stakes. It can save you or destroy you. So now I want to go over the agenda, make sure we've covered everything. We've only got a few minutes left. We've talked about how the truest you brings the most clarity to your message, how desperation repels, and the common unity, the resonation, is what attracts. How your greatest wound is your greatest power. And then when you fake it till you make imposter syndrome your friend. Now, I want to share the Anchor Brand content workbook with you. I'm going to type a link here in the chat box, and you can go ahead and open this for later. And I'm going to walk you through how to use this really quickly. Okay. Whoops, infinity mode. Sorry about that. Had a moment of infinity. All right. So in order to use this Google Doc workbook, which I use with my clients all the time, you have to make a copy of it. You go to File, make a copy, and then this copy is what you can edit. I like to highlight this piece and then just add your name right here. I'm going to call this Caelan's Anchor Brand content. And by filling out this workbook, you'll be able to refer to this in the future. Anytime you have to write a bio or make a call to action at the end of a podcast interview, you can put your best content here. There's sections about you. The personal statement is something I go over in marketing yourself. You know what an elevator pitch is. There's things about them, the people who are hearing your message, their frustrations and pain points. There's things about your solution. And then there's copy and paste sections down here so that if you're always giving out a link to a lead magnet or to a high priced offer, you can use those there. And this final section is really nice. The questions that you can use in a commercial conversation, that can be really helpful. So that's the Anchor Brand Content Workbook. In the last few minutes, I want to share with you how you can use your platform and what I do with Stellar Platforms to help the people elevate between the 4 levels of platforms. Everybody starts off on a soapbox. And if you have something to say, you can get up on a soapbox and attract an audience around you. But it's not until you have something to sell that it becomes a commercial platform. And that's the showroom level, where most of your content and messaging is focused around what people can buy and how they can buy it from you. And then from the stage to the stadium, every level of a platform has different focuses and considerations. There's actually 5 levels of platform. The lowest is in the sewer, where nobody wants to hear from you, but we don't want to focus on that one. What we do focus on is the cornerstones. If you want to elevate your platform, you do it by stacking cornerstones. Every platform has these 4 cornerstones: what you say, what you sell, your strategy, and your systems. And if any one of these cornerstones is weak or is lower than the others, then your platform will always be leaning in that direction. So by elevating your cornerstones, that's how we elevate the platforms. And what I do with Stellar Platforms is I help people in one of these 3 ways. There's done for you services, done with you, and do it yourself. And the difference between these options is time and money. Done for you services cost the most in money, but they cost the least in time. And the reverse is true for do it yourself. It's the cheapest financially, but it takes you the most time to do it. And what I do is I offer one-to-one consulting, where I log into a client's website and write their copy. And I also offer one-to-one coaching, where I talk with people 45 minutes a week for monthly coaching commitments. And then my do-it-yourself option is a marketing automation planner. It's a dense, detailed 16-section workbook, and each section comes with a 10-minute video. And you can go to marketingautomationplanner.com if you want to do it yourself. But if you want to elevate your platform and have it done with you or done for you, then I want to invite you to a one-to-one consultation. This consultation is free and there's no obligation. It's not a sales call. It's where we talk about you and talk about your business. The people who have had these consultations in the past, there's been really great results. And I have a bunch of testimonials that you can see on my website. I've worked with New York Times bestselling authors, Hall of Fame public speakers, and internationally syndicated radio hosts to help them clarify their messaging and elevate their platform. And so when you go to the link I'm going to put in the chat box right now, you're going to see this big orange button to apply for a discovery call. You can scroll down and read more testimonials. The button's at the bottom, and clicking on that button is going to ask you to fill out a form. And that form allows me to come to our conversation prepared with ideas. And if at the end of this 45-minute conversation, I think that there's room for us to do some work together, I'll invite you to a second call. And in that second call, we'll talk about my programs and how we could potentially work together. So I'm going to put this link in the chat box for caelanhuntress.com/coaching. And if you're interested in a discovery call, then go ahead and fill out the form there, and you'll get a link to my calendar so you can schedule a time for us to talk. And the final link that I'm going to put in here is a survey. I'd like to know how I did today, because part of my imposter syndrome is that I'm going to freak out in about 30 minutes. And I'm going to remember everything I did wrong in this presentation. And that's why I've become a good performer, is because I'm always doing retrospectives to see how I could improve. And something that would really help me to improve is to hear your honest feedback. So that final link that I put in the chat box, you can take the survey anonymously if you like, or if you're not on my newsletter list, you can use it to subscribe to my newsletter. And I'd love to know if you found today's presentation useful. Now we're at the end of our time today. So if you need to skedaddle, I totally understand. But if anybody wants to stick around for some Q&A, I'll be around for about 10 more minutes. But if you need to leave, then thanks so much for spending this time with me. Have fun out there.